Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the conference committee to order. And Chairman Hildebrand, you guys have been busy over there. I feel like I'm trying to find Waldo, only it's trying to find my house bills. And where are they and how many times have we passed them? But I think that you've done some pretty good work over there, so I appreciate it. I'd like to start off with, actually, it's the what we referred to as, nope, I got the wrong bill out. Never mind, never mind. It's now Senate sub for 2208. Is Scott Abbott not with us? Oh, there you are, Scott. They hid you up there. Would you like to just kind of give a briefing of what is in here, and then we take it from there, please?
Sure, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to. So, Senate substitute for House Bill 2208. You might recall this began in the House as the BSRB bill, made a number of changes to licensure of professions regulated by the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. The Senate substituted this bill to add the contents of a couple of other bills. They added the contents of Senate Bill 138, which was the Senate version of Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, the certification and funding bill for those clinics. The Senate committee also added the contents of Senate Bill 175, which was the Senate version of Rural Emergency Hospital Licensure. The bill that established that new licensure category for rural emergency hospitals. I will note that although the House combined the provisions of the Rural Emergency Hospital Licensure Bill with the Rural Emergency or the Rural Innovation Hospital Grants Program, the Senate did not include those provisions when they substituted the contents of the licensure provisions into substitute for House Bill 2208. So, Madam Chair, if there are any questions on the specifics of any of those provisions, otherwise they are largely the same as you have seen them in both House and Senate introduced versions of those bills.
All right, thank you. And we also have in this bill the BSRB, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, those provisions were not removed from the underlying bill.
Okay, so then I guess my next question is, have you had the opportunity to compare the Senate language on each of these bills to what the House had done?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have.
And they match?
For the most part, so this kind of goes back to the comments you made at the beginning about how these bills or these contents of these bills have kind of floated around in numerous vehicles as they've worked their way through both chambers. So there are changes that one of you made to the provisions of the other chamber's bill when it got to you on the second side that were not necessarily originally reflected in the introduced versions of those bills that you originally kicked out in the chamber of origin. So there are some differences in the provisions of the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board provisions, the underlying provisions of House Bill 2208, as well as the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics certification and funding bill. The contents of that bill as it was introduced, some changes were made. So 2208, as it stands as Senate substitute for House Bill 2208, includes the provisions of the original introduced bill, the BSRB provisions. I believe both committees took action to remove the new category of board-approved clinical supervisors for social work, as well as the associated fee that would have been added for that new licensure, for that new certification or approved supervisor category. However, the other provisions for expanded temporary permits, for reducing hours, for certain licensure requirements, for the practicum requirements, those were identical when they ultimately left both committees. And Madam Chair, I would point out one other thing, because this happened early in the process, I neglected to mention it, that provisions of House Bill 2066, the section that dealt with telemedicine, those provisions are also in this bill.
All right, thank you. Committee, are there questions for the reviser? Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Scott, just to clarify, when the Senate sent it over, we put the third, and I can't remember the acronyms, but the CCBHCs, correct? And that's still in there?
I would defer to Jenna if she could answer more quickly than I could.
Because we tried to match the House's version of that, so I just wanted to clarify, make sure that was still there.
Mr. Chair, if you're talking about Senate sub for House Bill 2208, those provisions are still in there. You can look above on the chart for the Senate version, the Senate Bill 238. You'll notice how those titles are almost exactly the same, with the exception of what was added later on. And so the Senate version of 238 as it was passed is the same underlying bill as what was ultimately adopted in 2028 with those additions that Scott just went over.
Thank you, Jenna.
Are there further questions? Representative Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, I just wanted to clarify, I believe you said the Senate version of 2208 did not include the hospital grant program. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think that was House Bill 2174 originally. The contents of that bill were not inserted when the Senate passed out Senate substitute for 2208.
I appreciate it. And the reason I asked that is I think the handout we have may have that wrong because it does have and grant program at the bottom on Senate sub for 2208. Thank you, Madam Chair.
What are you looking at? Okay. So just cross out grant program. Are there further questions? We were not able to actually get this officially into a conference, but we had scheduled it to conference on, and we did not have any intentions of kicking it out necessarily today. So we did want to have the discussion, and Senator Hildebrand, we would be interested in understanding the Senate's opposition to the rural hospital grant program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we worked House Bill 2208, the Senate substitute version of it in committee, I did bring that up as a amendment to offer it in discussion with the committee. It did not go over did not receive a warm reception, so we did not put that on. The objections were the $10 million, $30 million total fiscal note, 10 million SGF, and hospitals getting a grant that's a private entity was the complaints that I heard from committee members.
I did bring with me, Senator, some of the talking points that our leadership had on this bill. And it was kind of a case of, creating a fund that would allow our rural hospitals to actually right-size themselves. And the bill was presented out there last year, but because of COVID, we left and nothing advanced forward on it. And the timing is actually a lot better this year because of the fact that we have now got the new federal definition for a rural emergency hospital, which will allow our rural hospitals to be able to right-size themselves, because that's one of our biggest problems that they've had, is they would have lost their designation had they changed that. And this gives the communities the opportunity to, whether it's the city, it's the county, it's the hospital, a business or an organization that wants to come in with funding, so that for every $2 they are able to put up front, then the state would match $1. And there's only for the rural hospital. We eliminated the big urban counties that we had out there. So I didn't know if perhaps the Senate didn't have enough information to kind of understand what it was that we were trying to do. There's been concern and discussion quite a bit for the last few years of the, we know that we have lost some hospitals, and some of that had to do with the fact that their footprints were too big, and then they didn't have the funding to be able to right-size them. They couldn't have right-sized them until the feds came in with this designation. And the House has a strong opinion and belief in this provision, and would really like the House to reconsider their position.
I would agree the House needs to reconsider their position.
Okay, that's 2 times I've been busted today. So old people can make mistakes, I'm just saying, or senior people, however we want to say it. Know that the Senate would reconsider their position. And like I said, I'm going to share with you some of the talking points that we had. And for any of our research staff or revisers that need this handout, Dave can make sure that you get that. We know how important our rural hospitals are to us, and we don't want to really see any more of them, be lost in our communities. So that's why we would ask that you give consideration. Representative Epley.
So thank you, Chairman and Senator Hildebrand and members. This transitional program is very focused in what it will pay for, and it's really for transitional costs as these hospitals try to assign themselves the right footprint, the right size. This is not a forever after grant program. It's to help them go through that transition process. Some of these hospitals, I'm very aware, are so narrow on their margin of profit that they can't afford even to downsize or to right size into this new program. And this is just to really help facilitate that going forward. So again, I think some of that's outlined in this handout, I'm not sure, but I know that's the purpose of the grant program, and that's why I think the House position is as strong as it is. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Further comments or discussion, committee members? Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the base bill, are there any other topics in there that you guys have any heartburn over, or are you guys satisfied with the base bill as it is?
Yes.
So I believe the Senate's position is fairly strong on that as well, on the base bill. So we do have that agreement that the base bill is very strong. I do know that the Rural Hospital Act was very favorable in the Senate. That position is strong as well. Unfortunately for us, we did not have an opportunity to have a hearing or work the rural grant program. So that is Rural Hospital Grant Program. So I would not feel comfortable making any decisions on that until we have had an opportunity to look more at the handout that you have provided and let us discuss it a little bit more detail and maybe get some feedback from our caucus on this as well.
Okay. And I think, and if there's, if it's an asset for any of us to discuss with some of your colleagues, we'd be happy to take and do this. I can tell you that we stand firmly enough with this, and it was one of the reasons why when we passed out the rural hospital designation that we attached the rural hospital to it, so they are a pair. One does not advance without the other. Further questions or comments? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. couple of things that I have heard on our Senate committee as well as on of other senators was the concern of, would this be a one-time amount or would this be an ongoing amount? Is there a sunset date? And is it, because would you need a sunset date if it's just one time? And then thirdly, with the COVID dollars and the federal dollars, should we see what the federal government can give them? Because we understand that if this were passed with the emergency designation, that there would be more federal dollars drawn down. Those are the three areas that I would that we could talk about.
Okay, I'll try to remember each point you made in there. I did ask Revisor Abbott to come up with language to address the issue of the hospitals would have to exhaust federal funding first, including the COVID dollars in order to do this. And it is a one-time, and I believe the expiration date is 25. So the full fiscal note on that for the state obligation is $10 million max. That's a cap. Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that clarification. Maybe we could get a little bit of a clarification on the $10 million transfer from SGF to the fund. When does that transfer take place? Is it all at once, a one-time transfer, or when will that hit to the SGF happen?
Scott, do you have that piece?
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator, the transfer would happen in one $10 million lump sum on July 1 of this year. So at the very beginning of the program becoming effective, the entire 10 million would be transferred from SGF to this dedicated special revenue fund for the grant program.
Then that assures that it's available at whatever time that the hospitals or the communities are able to come up with the $2 matching. Senator Gossage.
That was going to be my next question, which is something else that came up. How would it be disseminated? So it's not, we're going to look at all the rural hospitals and everybody's going to get their certain amount based on population, but it's when, if you've got $50, we'll give you $50. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I believe that's how it was structured. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, Madam Chair. So how the process would work is,
100 to 50.
Yeah, 100 to 50.
Yes, 2 to 1.
yeah, however the math works out. The process would be that the hospital or the Board of County Commissioners that's applying for the grant for a hospital in that county, part of the application process is they have to describe the hospital, they have to describe the services, they have to include, kind of sufficient certification that they have secured the money for that hospital on the private side in order to meet the private match requirement. So all of that kind of happens in the application process.
And who reviews the application?
That's all through KDHE.
KDHE. And one last question, if I may, Madam Chair, is there a cap per hospital?
The provisions in the bill as they currently exist do not contemplate any kind of limit on the dollar amount that a hospital could receive.
Thank you.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What if the $10 million is not used before the sunset of 2025? What happens to the balance of those funds?
It should just come right back into the state general fund, correct, Scott?
Yes, Madam Chair. So this is kind of the
It'll
end of
lapse.
House Bill 2174. The very end of that bill has a provision for the end of fiscal year 2025 that would kind of wind up that fund. So any money that's left in that special revenue fund goes back to SGF. Then there's some boilerplate language about how if there are any liabilities on that fund that still exist, those are also transferred to and imposed on the SGF. And that fund would just be closed out on that date.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although I think that this House Bill 2174 has a lot of merit, this grant program has a I am concerned about your comment about, on the House side, you felt that the, original bill, the Rural Hospital, Emergency Hospital Act is tied firmly to this grant program. And I guess as the chair has said, Senator Hildebrand, we didn't even discuss as a committee this House Bill 2174. So, but earlier you'd also said that, the federal government has now made the rural emergency hospital an easier move for funding and such. And so could you expand a little bit why you feel that they're so tightly tied together?
I think the designation is more about being able to right-size their hospitals. There is a potential for additional funding, but we firmly believe that in our discussions, as we've looked at things, that there will be a few of the hospitals out there. We don't see all of them coming on board and utilizing this program, but there will be some of the communities that could definitely use the assistance. And that's why we felt like we've heard year after year after year that we have to save our rural hospitals, we have to save them. And I know there was a plan that was floated here a few years ago, and it would have provided just an automatic payout grant type program to the hospitals. And our leadership chose to come back in and design something that would, provide that match rate in there and give us a cap. We could always revisit it if we needed to after 2025. But at this time here, we think there's a handful of the hospitals out there that could truly benefit, and we want to make sure that we can keep them. Because that discussion has been a major, major discussion for the last several years, that we've got hospitals closing and that there's no other way to save them except to expand Medicaid. And we see this as a way to help save our rural hospitals.
You helped me out so much with your comments there. We do know another way to save them, and that would be Medicaid expansion, which neither the House nor the Senate has wanted to move forward with those discussions this year. So there are other avenues that we've chosen as a legislature not to move forward on. So I think that's a little bit, that's a limitation that's not necessarily out there. But this ability, because I think the great thing about the Rural Emergency Hospital Act in 2208 is that it is a tool that community makes a decision about, and they're involved in making that decision. The funding piece that is in 2174 is just another, is kind of a carrot that may be available to be used if they have other sources of funding that we would then match at the state level. But we do have some other options that we could be looking at as state, and we chose not to do that.
Well, Senator Petty, I might, comment that in a meeting that myself and at the time Senator Denning and Representative Hawkins and Senator Solentrop were in with the governor, and we were discussing the hospital issue as well as our Medicaid issue. And, I made the comment that we're hearing all the time that this will save the hospitals, but we do have information that shows it does not save them because they are not right-sized. And the governor at that time responded that she had not said that it would save hospitals in that meeting. Now, we can go back and find clips where she said different, and one of those examples would be Fort Scott. And Fort Scott had a footprint that was bigger than the judicial center across the street. That's not sustainable in rural Kansas anymore.
Of course, I'm sure this is not a debate that we want to continue to have here, but we're talking about tools, and you brought up tools. So I'm just saying that Medicaid expansion is a tool that our state has decided to give away more than $2 billion. And this year, if we pass Medicaid expansion, we would be not only getting 90% of the cost, we would also be getting $460 million more, which would more than cover our costs. So we could be covering our costs for the next 10 years, but we're making that choice not to do that. I just have to I have this opportunity, I have to bring it up. Medicaid expansion is very important to a lot of Kansans.
Well, and I can also tell you, Senator, that the federal government doesn't have a very good track record of promising to fund something at a certain rate and then not following through with it. We can go back and look at special education. They have never funded special education. They passed the majority of that down as an unfunded mandate to the state. If we look at what has been happening with our CHIPS program, and I was actually here when CHIPS came into the state of Kansas, it was S-CHIP at the time, and it was at a specific match rate, and guess what? That is now going down. So that means that we are having to come up with more SGF dollars. So to, bank on the federal government to offer us a rate and say they're going to stay at that, they don't have a very good track record at this time.
There's no state that's left Medicaid expansion, that has passed Medicaid expansion. There's no state that's left. We're in the minority when it comes to this. So we're talking about Medicaid expansion that you can go back to, you can use a lot of things of what they did or did not do, and we could go back and forth about that, but there is no state that's passed Medicaid expansions that's left. They've all stayed with it because it provides health insurance for the neediest of their state, and it would do that for Kansans as well.
It also takes a lot of people off of their current Obamacare, because if you're between the 100 to 130 match, you cannot stay on Obamacare. You will have to go into Medicaid, and that's federal law. Senator Gossage, excuse me. I can come back to you, Senator Petty.
I realize that we're not here to discuss Medicaid expansion. We're talking about these bills that we have. But I just thought that I should point out there's yet to be a state that helped rural hospitals that expanded Medicaid. That's just a myth. And done lots of study on that, and rural hospitals still closed. But I would like to discuss what we're talking about, the grant. So if the House were to say, back in my day, my dad called it a druther. If I have my druther, I would rather have what? What is it that, because we were fine with 2208. So what is your thinking?
Is to add the rural hospital grant program into 2208. Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's been many moons since we did Senate Bill 175 in committee. Just for a refresher, I know the effective date before a hospital could actually implement the new Kansas Rural Emergency Act would be 2023. I'm trying to remember going back. Does anybody remember what the process is for a hospital, the time for them to implement that change? Can they implement it as soon as this bill is passed, but not actually get the designation? Is there a process, a time frame that all that has to work out? Or do they have to wait till 2023?
Scott, do you have that?
Madam Chair, I think that's more a matter of implementation that I can't really speak to with any degree of expertise. Legally, the bill would create that designation as soon as it became effective, which would be July 1 of this year, publication in the statute book. Depending on which version you're talking about, if it was changed to register or not. But legally, it would create that designation as soon as the bill became effective. I am not immediately sure of what kind of time frame it would require as far as any federal approvals that are required or the application process kind of going forward on the implementation side, though.
Senator, we can make sure, because we're not taking action on this today, is we can have Scott look into that, and because I don't see it just flipping through the bill here, and make sure we answer your questions.
Thank you. I think that would be pretty important to have. So thank you.
Okay. Is there further questions or comments on this bill? Representative Epley.
I guess. Thank you, Madam Chair. And while I appreciate the comments made about Medicaid expansion from the senator, this is a little different tool that we can utilize. It's very focused, and it's going to directly help rural hospitals. And I really think that Again, I'm not prepared or want to get into discussion about Medicaid expansion today. I think that this is a tool that is very targeted and very beneficial to help those rural hospitals transition moving forward, that is really needed for a lot of situations. And I grew up near Independence, and I know for a fact that had this capability been available to them, they had a very large footprint. It would have been very helpful to them to have downsized and to have moved into perhaps this designation rather than completely losing their hospital, just as an example. And up where I live in Northeast Kansas, I know it would have been very helpful for Horton, Kansas, to have transitioned. And again, though they're lost, and this does not help them, but it helps those other 30-plus hospitals that are very marginal in their bottom line in this grant program to transition with telehealth capability and to try to get with the new age and to modify their footprint. And it's again, it has nothing to do with Medicaid expansion, and that's why I think this is very targeted and very helpful to rural hospitals for the next several years as they transition to this new designation that's available. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right. And I'm losing track of these numbers. I apologize for that. I'm just not. You guys just do some creative work over there, Senator. I'm impressed. I'm just going to have to learn your system here. I believe 2262, is that the next one that we had, Scott? I don't see that. Oh, 2254. Okay, so if I understood it, 2254 included House Bill 2262, which was the funeral cremation legislation, and then it also included the funeral irrevocable trusts in it. Is that correct? And okay, and we had originally on 330 had non-concurred with that in the House. And we think that the Senate has done champion work on that. And so what we'd like to do at this time would be to actually concur on that here in this conference committee.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure we need to break and discuss this. It's a pretty good ask that you ask for the Senate on this version, but I think we would probably all be in agreement with that.
You're welcome to huddle in the corner. I'm just saying.
Just, can you say again, so are you concurring with 2254?
Yes,
Okay.
with the understanding that that also includes 2262, which was the funeral cremation bill. So the two are combined. Scott shaking his head. I don't see it. Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is an accurate description.
Agree with- Senator Hildebrand.
Madam Chair, after some very in-depth debate with my committee members, we accept your offer.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So one conference committee report down. Is that correct, Reviser Abbott? Two bills down, one conference committee report down.
Well, Madam Chair, even better for me, this one doesn't require a report. All it will require is you to make a motion on the floor, so works
All
for
right, they
me.
just told me I had to concur in here, so I tried to do it on the floor, and they said, no, 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 you can't do that, so. I believe, Senator, that you are contemplating the idea of looking at all the different compacts, and we had passed the Psych Pack and the PT Compact, and I think there's one that you haven't passed, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, we still have at least one under the line in our general orders, our chamber. All of the compacts came out of our committee fairly non-controversial. So if we can find a vehicle to put all of those together, I think that would be our desire on the Senate side.
You know, I think that if we wanted to kind of, check some of these things off of our list so that when we come back later, we have less of them on there, because I think there will be vehicles for us to be able to do that, Senator, is if we could take the 2209 site pack and the 2279 PT compact, that we could get a concur on conference with that, those two bills. We can put them either in 2209 or 2259. Would that be, or I mean, 2279 or 2209, is that correct, Scott? Senator Hildebrand.
Madam Chair, 2209 and 2279 are still below the line. We have not kicked those out of the Senate. So that's our issue currently.
So when will you be, are you going on general orders this week?
We are going on general orders tomorrow. I have not found out what bills we are working, but I have requested a couple of these bills so we can get those into conference. So as soon as I find out for sure, I will let you know.
So do you think you'll be on general orders during the veto session as well?
That's a good question. I don't know.
So I'm just a little bit worried that we run out the clock on these, and because they have passed one chamber, they are conferenceable at this time. So I would like you to give consideration that we put those two in together in a bill this week, if at all possible. Then we had, and I think this is another one that you have below the line, which is a bill of great importance to the Pharmacy Board, and that would be House Bill 2280. It appears, Senator, that, and this one here, I believe, is sitting below the line in your chamber. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct. And we did amend that from the House version. So, and we would, if it does pass our chamber, if we do get it above the line and do pass it, we would really like to keep our version.
I noticed you had an aversion to some fee caps being increased. And in my conversations with the director, they are willing to, what they would like to do, because one of the programs that the Board of Pharmacy that's very important to the Board of Pharmacy and also to the state of Kansas is our K-Trax program. And on page 35, line 25 to 30 is the non-resident fee. And this here is actually a brand new fee. It wasn't one raising a cap, and our committee felt that it, actually kind of made sense that if they're, not residents, that they should be fee just, have a fee just like our others do. And that has the potential of raising probably around $200,000 to help us continue with our K-Trax program. So we'd be willing to accept all of the other language that you struck in here. If we could come back and add back in, like I said, page 35, lines 25 to 30. Then there's also been the discussion, I believe that you had an amendment that you added to this bill as it came out of committee that dealt with off-label prescription medications. Is that correct?
Yes, if my memory serves me correctly, it was Senate Bill 211. We inserted into that.
And what was the purpose that the Senate felt like we needed to add language in statute for off-label? I guess we're not really, we understand that doctors do prescribe off-label. It's not an unusual practice to have, so I'm not quite sure why it is that we needed this language in statute.
Madam Chair, if my memory serves me correctly, the concern of the committee at that time, or the overall committee, was that there were instances during COVID that doctors were not allowed to prescribe off-label, and that was the reason for inserting Senate Bill 211.
Did you have evidence presented to your committee of doctors, and who were they told and that they were not allowed to prescribe off-label? Because I do know that some doctors did prescribe off-label during COVID.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we actually have a committee member that is a doctor, and that is who presented it and presented the information.
So if I go online and pull up your testimony, that's going to show us who it was that told doctors that they could not prescribe off-label?
Madam Chair, I do not believe there was testimony on it, only his explanation when he offered, because it was an amendment. We never had a hearing on Senate Bill 211.
I guess that, I'm a little bit, concerned with this because, like I said, I know that there were doctors across the state of Kansas that did prescribe off-label, during COVID, and I'm a little bit concerned about adding something to statute that we can't necessarily substantiate on this piece here. So that would be my concern on that bill. So I would like you to give consideration to putting back in the non-resident fee, leave the other caps where they are currently at, what current law is, because by you striking that, it just brings them back to their original caps. And, legislators need to understand that a lot of times when these agencies come in, if they ask for a fee to be at $200, but they're currently at $125, it doesn't mean they're going to raise to $200. We just give them the ability to raise it to that cap. And my experience has been that they do a pretty good job of just, coming in on an as-need basis for that. And it keeps us from every year of them having to, figure out how they're going to adjust their budgets with how things fluctuate. So if you would give that consideration, we would appreciate it.
Madam Chair, when we leave this committee, we will give that some consideration.
I believe also, Senator, we had House Bill 2234, which dealt with the EMS, and that one's also sitting below your line. I'm starting to think maybe you just didn't like a bunch of our bills out there, Senator.
Madam Chair,
did
we
as good work as you.
liked your bills. We got them kicked out. For some reason, the person or people that decide what goes above the line didn't like them as well as we did.
I think I'm a little more tenacious, maybe, with some of my leadership in the House with that. So I think what we had in discussion was Senate Bill 170. Senate Bill 170 is also in a House bill, the trauma.
I believe that is correct.
We discussed 2209. We discussed 2234. We did have House Bill 2259, which dealt with partner therapy, and it looks like that this perhaps did not come out of your committee. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Then we discussed House Bill 2279, and it's below the line, House Bill 2280 below the line. And then we dealt with the funeral cremation and the irrevocable trust for funerals. So is there anything, Scott, that we haven't touched on today?
Madam Chair, I think that's all of the subject matters of the bills that you've had under consideration.
All right. I guess we can, perhaps find some time tomorrow, maybe you can visit with your, your committee and your, see where your folks here are at. Perhaps have a discussion with your leadership team a little bit and see if, if they wouldn't be amendable to some of these. Because for some, they may not seem like a big issue, but for others, they do become a big issue if we don't advance some of these. And we were pretty careful about the legislation that we did pass out of the House this year and trying to stay on top of things. And of course, 2208 is probably the most massive bill, because if we're able to pass that bill and you were to pull the checklist off of the Mental Health Modernization Committee, you would find we would start checking a whole lot of boxes and helping to advance mental health finally in Kansas, seeing as how we didn't keep our promise when we shut down Topeka State Hospital or the Winfield facility. So, seeing no further discussion, I guess we'll wait to see when we can find a time to meet tomorrow. Does that sound good?
Madam Chair, that sounds good. We'll look at our schedules and get back with you and set up a new time.
Okay, well, we thank you for your time today. With that committee, we are adjourned.